needs the liability of none other than people like Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, George Stephanopoulos. I mean, we don't even have to get into the ESPN stuff. But you look at what's going on at The View, and then you look at Disney as a whole, you look at that declining stock price, and you think about what Bob Iger said there back at Sun Valley, saying, I want to get rid of some of these properties. He hasn't done it yet because he can't. Believe me, he'd get rid of them if he could. So if he can't get rid of them, it leaves you asking, like, what are they? Why does nobody want them? Well, maybe it's because, you know, you get programs like this one that I'm about to show you. Joy Behar on The View today trying to talk about trade tariffs. You know, honestly, this woman should never talk about the economy. She should never talk about the stock market. She really just not ought to talk about Trump because somehow it gets her a little too riled up. Here we go. Joy Behar saying that Trump is somehow guilty of insider trading because he told everybody he thought it was a buying opportunity. And what do you know? It was.
Well, first of all, in order to kiss his ass, you have to get Mike Johnson out of the way. That's number one. Number two, what is his exact plan is what I want to know. Yeah. I was home, I had a cold yesterday, so I was home watching everything. And I'm thinking, he's trying to destroy the country. Now, why is he doing that? Just as a person in the audience, like, watching this. Yeah. So there's a couple of theories.
Yes. And
like what's... First of all, if he tanks the entire, what do you call
economy,
it? The stock market, then all his billionaire friends can swoop in and buy everything low. That's not an original idea. That's Hakeem Jeffries said that. And the other thing, and in fact, today on Truth Social.
Can I just say, that is such a, she doesn't even know the word for the stock market, right? She's like, what do you call it? What do you call it? And somebody goes, the economy? No, the stock market. Unbelievable. Let's keep going.
So Trump wrote, a great time to buy. The other theory is from James Carville, which I think is interesting, that he wants to stoke such instability and chaos to consolidate power for himself so that people start to really go nuts, which we're starting to.
No, we're not.
Well, people are starting to get mad.
Well, that's good. Yeah. You want them to get mad.
But how mad will people get, and how broke will people get, and how many jobs will be lost? And then he can say, well, there's too much chaos, and now we're going to have martial law in this country, and he becomes a dictator. I mean, I don't know. That may be out of the bounds.
Anything is possible.
But it's possible.
Yeah.
So just as somebody watching the news, that's what I see.
Oh, well, you know. We're so happy to have your interpretation of what you see. She's also gone on to say that egg prices are going up. I want to clarify for the record, egg prices are going down. In fact, if you look at the latest inflation report, what did you see today? CPI coming in at 2.4%. That is lower than expected. Economists were looking for 2.6%. So a little good news there, 2.4%. Hey, we'll take it. I get it that it's backward looking. I get it. Because you haven't accounted for the effect of the tariffs yet. But we're moving in the right direction. But you wouldn't know it on something like The View because they just lie and they lie and they lie and they lie. I think about this, other moment that I'm going to show you momentarily, back when Whoopi Goldberg, well, I'll show you now. Whoopi Goldberg was trying to say that Donald Trump would put people in camps, like internment camps. I mean, this is on broadcast television, and you wonder why the FCC is investigating and Bob Iger's tearing his hair out.
What's interesting for me is that people's faith in the country is waning. That's the thing that's pissing me off, because in fact, there's a reason Joe Biden ran the way he did. There's a reason he's running for democracy now, because that's really what's at stake. You worried that you can't pay your bill? Wait till the other guy becomes president, and you won't have to worry about it because you'll be in some camp somewhere, because that's his promise. His promise to us is he's going to force people to do his bidding. That's what he said. I'm going to be good on day one, and I'm going to turn into this other person. So here's the deal. This is all up to you. This is all up to you. We're going to sit up here till we're green in the face. But this really comes down to the people. What is the country you want? Do you want the country that you kind of thought you had, where we all get to say what we think and we don't have to be afraid of being American? And believing that, there will be people who come in, and some will get in quick, and some will take a different route, but they're coming here for a reason, because they're living in a place that's not good for their families. If you're okay with that, You understand that? Then fight for us to find a better way to make immigration work. Fight for that. Don't fight for keeping everybody out, because then we all have to leave.
Oh, yes. You know, the immigration thing, we can talk about that a little bit later too, because they're flipping out now. That's an older clip, but they're flipping out now because the Supreme Court said, you know what? The 1798 Aliens Act, that stays. And Pam Bondi, you can export people. So they don't know what to, they're absolutely losing their minds. One has to wonder, I mean, they wanted 800,000 illegals to be able to vote in the state of New York. The court just turned that one away. You see what Elon Musk is uncovering. Somehow they were giving out millions of social security numbers to people that were here illegally. And I'm like, wait. Do they mean like taxpayer identification numbers? And they're like, no. This is like the real stuff, right? This is actually social security numbers that they were giving out. And I'm blown away by that. Let me pull this number up. Fox had a good graphic on it. Actually, let's take a look. Look at that. Unbelievable. I mean, new non-citizen social security numbers that were being issued, 270,000 back in 2021. And then it was increasing each year, nearly 600,000 in 2022. Doge found nearly 1 million in 2023. And holy moly, we got 2024 there, ladies and gentlemen, with over 2 million, nearly 2.1 million. My gosh. So you got to ask yourself, what is that about? Well, The View and many members of the mainstream media think that that's all fine, right? You're just supposed to welcome everyone here. Jasmine Crockett has a few reasons for it. She, I believe, said, we played this yesterday for you, and it's on my shorts feed. She said, well, you know, we need migrants because we're not going to be picking the cotton. Lovely. Well, I'll tell you what, like, machines are going to be doing a lot, Jasmine, overall. But back to The View, back to what I showed you with Joy Behar, claiming somehow that Donald Trump was engaging in insider trading because he told people on Truth Social, hey, it's a great buying opportunity right before he made a big announcement. I'll say this, at least he told people, right? Well, they're doubling down on this. And yet again, another Democrat who doesn't seem to know the terminology, whether it's Joy Behar not understanding the difference between the economy and the stock market, or whether this is AOC, whom I'm about to show you, not understanding the difference between tariffs and taxes. Here we go.
Trump seems to be doing, you know, from tweeting people to buy stock and then later announcing his development on taxes. If people are pissed about insider trading here at the House, look at what's happening at the White House right now and with the Republican Party.
Do you think he knew what he was doing when he sent out that message about stocks before he made the announcement?
It sure seemed like he did. I don't think that it was a coincidence. I don't think that Trump just coincidentally said buy stocks and then shortly later made an announcement that dramatically inflated and dramatically raised a lot of these asset prices. And, you know, I've heard murmurings on the floor that there may have been people that knew that this was coming. And I'm very interested in seeing some of the stock disclosures that come out in when those reports are due. And I'm very interested in what members of Congress have been buying and trading stocks in the last 24 hours prior to this tariff announcement.
Okay. All right. So she thinks that that's what it was. I would just say, look, you know, if you made any money yesterday, you lost it today, or at least some of it. We had a market that was trading down today. I've said this. Look, my overall philosophy on this, and we can talk about this a little bit later on this show, is that if you have the liquidity, right, you have a little bit of money on the side, you want to take those opportunities to be strategic and look at the market when it's down, as opposed to buying it on the way up. I am a consummate bull. I believe in America. I actually believe in what they're trying to achieve right now. And it's not perfect. You know, you've heard me talk about, you know, Peter Navarro and my preference for having Scott Bessent there as the advisor. But I will tell you that they're moving in the right direction. And the economy overall seems to be moving in the right direction, especially with inflation coming down today with the CPI report. So there are things that I like Core CPI as well, looking very, very attractive. So there are things that I like, but they're just going to fight him on everything tooth and nail. I mean, think about it. Years ago, you weren't fighting about having illegal immigrants. You weren't fighting about making sure that you could get people here illegally to the point where you're talking about 2 million Social Security cards that were being handed out. That is unbelievable to me. Absolutely unbelievable. So you really have to question their judgment, and you have to question the media for constantly pushing this, because that's what The View has become. It's what ABC News has become. It is what George Stephanopoulos' program has become. I wonder if it's because you've heard me talk before about how Obama changed all those propaganda rules, because it used to be that you couldn't actually do this. You couldn't. I mean, we had money that was put in place to advance a certain propaganda agenda overseas because we were fighting the Cold War, right? So that was called the Smith-Mundt Act. It was like from 1948 or 1945, and they basically were like, okay, we're going to put this money, taxpayer dollars, into promoting a certain point of view, and we're going to do it overseas. We have like this Chinese wall, no pun intended, and you cannot allow for this propaganda to come back here. But in 2013, Obama decided, you know what, we're going to lift that domestic ban. And all that money that was going to feed the propaganda machine to protect democracy overseas for our various interests in terms of keeping certain people in charge, well, guess what? That got turned back on ourselves. And you kind of got to ask yourself, did Disney have any of that? Was that partly what was going on? Is that why they've been so crazed that Donald Trump was winning? And what about the rest of the networks? Because they all effectively became mouthpieces, did they not? Over and over and over again for only one point of view. It's like you don't hear anything else. So Disney's trading way down, as I said, closed a little bit better than this, but you can see how it's plummeted really in the last 5 years. And that's bad, right? Because look, if things stay steady, you're not happy because there's been inflation, right? So you don't want your stocks going down. Definitely not. As we look at this market, again, I want to point out that I do continue to invest amid the volatility, and I think you need to be very selective. And there are times when we take money off the table. There are times when we put it in. You can find out more by going and checking out my company, 76research.com. Use code word dollar. We get tons of information there for you, and hopefully you can use that to your advantage as we think about things. I'm laughing in the chat because Peace of My Mind is pointing out that gold, which is something that we have obviously recommended, you hear me talk about it here a lot on this program, is now trading upwards of $3,100 an ounce. And there's an expectation from some analysts, like those at Goldman Sachs, one of my former employers, that it could go to $3,300. I talked to somebody the other day suggesting that it could even go much higher than that if, in fact, we are really struggling with a challenging situation. So we are looking at a lot of interesting things, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, George Stephanopoulos is certainly giving Bob Iger a bit of a headache there at ABC News. This story just coming out this afternoon. Apparently, George decided to hide what he really thought of Joe Biden during the election. Now, why doesn't that surprise me? I mean, I think they, like this, it's funny that it's kind of a headline, but it is in a new book, okay? So there's this new book that's out, and they're saying George Stephanopoulos totally hid what he really thought of Biden, and he thought he was just like heartbreaking up close. And of course he thought that. I mean, everybody knew that. This is according to the New York Post. George Stephanopoulos reportedly said former President Joe Biden was heartbreaking up close following an interview that was meant to reassure America. Remember when he did that? He sat down with Joe Biden, I guess his idol, and he did this interview, and we were all like, oh my gosh. It came after the debate in which we were like, oh my gosh, right? I mean, Stephanopoulos, he did this interview, and apparently afterwards, according to the author of this book's just coming out, and it's got all the like inside scoop. Apparently, like Kamala was running around trying to backstab any other black woman that might possibly be a VP candidate in 2020. Forgive me, even earlier. But anyway, it was 2020, and then in 2024, she had her own interests as well. But he was in bad shape, and everyone knew it, and yet they hid it. They absolutely hid it. And this is a problem. Apparently, he he is revealed to have said some things to producers, etc. This came out in the book. He said that to the guy on the street. Do you remember, like, somebody asked him and it became such a big deal, and ABC was like, oh my gosh, he didn't mean it, because somebody was like passing by and they're like, do you think he can really do it? And he said, I don't think he can serve 4 more years. That whole thing went viral. And before you knew it, Georgie Boy was like out saying, oh no, like that was taken out of context, whatever. He was trying to hide from that one. But it was obvious to everyone, for goodness sakes. The most disgusting thing of all of this is that the media tried to hide it from us. And guys, you can't do that anymore, because guess what? The structural changes that Bob Iger was referring to out at Sun Valley with CNBC, those structural changes mean information flows quickly. Opinion flows quickly. There's a freedom to express yourself unlike anything that we have seen previously, because you don't have to sit around and wait for the printing press. It's happening in real time. And things are on video and things go viral. And hey, we're here. I'm able to do a live show from my studio. Think about that. I mean, I remember back in the days, like having to get the live truck, and it cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and you got your minute 30, of which 10 seconds would be live on the evening news. That was the old world in which we lived. And I think what's happened in the media is they were used to having so much control and influence over the narrative, and that has shifted. It makes them very nervous because Donald Trump has been ahead on that game, right? He's willing to like broadcast all his cabinet meetings, for goodness sakes. He's willing to talk to the media at length. He'll talk to anyone. And they don't know quite how to manage that. So you got George Stephanopoulos, who's a problem for Bob Iger. And you think back on everything that went down. And do you remember when Facebook was being really, really cautious about what they allowed on Facebook, et cetera? You get the ABC News anchor kind of pushing, in this case, I want to go back in time to, I guess this would have been 2020, and he's pushing him to say, oh, okay, well, you got to get rid of the misinformation. It's like a bullying tactic right there. And Zuckerberg's like, well, debate matters too. Yeah, debate matters. And we've learned from Zuckerberg that they were breathing down his neck the entire time, saying, you got to get rid of this or that, or, it was all about what was good for them. They don't want you to have the freedom to see and hear. And so, the tech companies have admitted it. Zuckerberg has admitted it. And if you go back in time, you hear him trying to tell Stephanopoulos that debate actually matters.
Facebook also holds its users accountable by continuing to monitor and flag posts for harmful misinformation about the disease. How do you deal with the fact that Facebook is now being used to organize a lot of these protests to defy social distancing, defy the social distancing guidelines in states? Is somebody trying to organize something like that, does that qualify as harmful information?
We do classify that as harmful misinformation, and we take that down. At the same time, it's important that people can debate policies. So there's a line on this, but
yeah, I mean, and he's since come out and said he had his back up against the wall because the Biden administration was like, this is what you got to do. And we also learned from Susan Page, the reporter at USA Today, who sat down with Biden for one of the final interviews, that one of his biggest regrets of his entire administration was that he didn't control the information better, that there was too much misinformation out there. And I'm like, buddy, the misinformation, sorry, that was coming from you. I mean, your son's laptop? Oh, that was just, Russian misinformation brought to you courtesy of Giuliani and the Russians. No, it was actually Hunter Biden's laptop, and the FBI knew it was Hunter Biden's laptop because they had already started investigating Hunter Biden's laptop. Unbelievable. Camshaft 08, good to have you here. Thank you for your generosity, pointing out Camshaft is really tired of the Democrats pointing to Obama's terrible first debate with Romney. Obama was leading the polls going in, and everyone knew he was mentally declining. You can attribute that to an off night. Okay, so you think Obama, I don't know about Obama having mental decline. I do think that for sure Biden had it. But I mean, Obama, I just didn't like Obama's policies, shall we say. I don't know, as I'll say, it's a mental decline. Maybe he's got that now. I mean, we'll see if he stays married to Michelle, right? Anyway, the reality is there was all this pressure from the administration on the mainstream media. The mainstream media did what they wanted. In some cases, maybe Facebook tried to fight back a little bit, but there was a narrative, and all of them contributed to that narrative, including one Kamala Harris, right, who sat there with a straight face and told us, Biden's great, he's wonderful, totally with it. Yeah, right.
We have a very bold and vibrant president in Joe Biden.
But a majority of Americans, a majority of Democrats, according to our new poll, say they don't want President Biden to run again. What do you say to them?
I mean, George, I think that age is more than a chronological fact, to be very frank with you. It's about thinking about whether we have in our leader, which we do in Joe Biden, somebody who is bold. I mean, think about it. And in Joe Biden, we have a president who is probably one of the boldest and strongest American presidents we have had in his response to the needs of the American people. But he is an extraordinary leader, and I wish that people could see what I see, because there's only one person who sits behind that resolute desk.
You're 58 now. If you win the second term, as you and the president are running to do, he would be 86 at the end of it. The Wall Street Journal had a poll showing 2/3 of Democrats say Joe Biden is too old to run again. Are you prepared to be commander-in-chief?
Yes, I am, if necessary. But Joe Biden is going to be fine. And let me tell you something. I work with Joe Biden every day. The work that under Joe Biden's leadership our administration has accomplished is transformative.
Transformative. Yeah, he's so great. I mean, there were a bunch of, that was CBS there at the end, but ABC's in trouble because they were very much part of this. And the key political show where the host is a former spokesperson for Clinton. I mean, think about that. Like, guys, you don't even want to pretend. You don't even want to hide. No, he's a Democrat, like card-carrying Democrat. He hosts the biggest political show. Now you get Trump in charge with Brendan Carr there at the FCC saying, I don't think this really all makes sense. I don't think that people trust the media anymore. I mean, just look at the fact that you guys had to pay at Disney $16 million to Trump's library and legal fees because you decided to absolutely libel him on live television. Now, the clip I'm about to show you, you'll remember, because George Stephanopoulos accused Donald Trump of something that he had never been actually convicted of. And you got to say, okay, well, you've got like millions and millions of viewers. Like, why would you do this? He wasn't supposed to do this. It has come out since that the producers were all warning him, do not do this, do not do this. And he did it anyway. Watch him with Nancy Mace.
And you've endorsed Donald Trump for president. Judges and 2 separate juries have found him liable for rape and for defaming the victim of that rape. How do you square your endorsement of Donald Trump with the testimony we just saw?
Well, I will tell you, I was raped at the age of 16. And any rape victim will tell you, I've lived for 30 years with an incredible amount of shame over being raped. I didn't come forward because of that judgment and shame that I felt. And it's a shame that you will never feel, George. And I'm not going to sit here on your show and be asked a question meant to shame me about another potential rape victim. I'm not gonna do that.
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald Trump.
No, you are shaming me.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury. Donald Trump has been found liable for defaming the victim of that rape by a jury. It's been affirmed by a judge.
It was not a criminal court case, number one. Number two, I live with shame. And you're asking me a question about my political choices, trying to shame me as a rape victim, and I find it disgusting. And quite frankly, E. Jean Carroll's comments when she did get the judgment, joking about what she was going to buy, it makes it harder for women to come forward when they make a mockery out of rape, when they joke about it.
Doesn't it make it harder for women to come forward when they are defamed by
It makes it harder when other women
candidates?
joke about it, and she's joked about it. I find it offensive. And I also find it offensive that you're trying to shame me with this question.
I'm not trying to shame
you
at all. In fact,
I have
called
dealt
you
with this for 30 years. You know how hard it was to tell my story 5 years ago when they were doing a fetal heartbeat bill and there were no exceptions for rape, incest, or rape or incest in there? I had to tell my story because no other woman was coming forward. No rape victims were represented. And you're trying to shame me this morning.
I'm just asking.
And I find it offensive, and this is why women won't come forward.
women won't come forward because they're defamed by those who perpetrate rape. Donald Trump
They are judged and they're shamed, and you're trying to shame
I mean, so, he just keeps saying it. He said it a few times in there, and he's not too happy that ABC decided to settle and pay up to the tune of some $16 million. No, he's not happy at all. In fact, he's so unhappy about the whole thing that he's apparently threatening to leave, but I have a feeling they'll get rid of him first. I mean, again, he was covering up everything. So when you look at this company and try and value this company, and we've done some reporting on this at 76 Research, and we have that all in the newsletter. Again, you can use code word dollar. I put it in the show links. When you look at this company and you think about it, its news business is a liability. It is not an asset. They got to get rid of this guy. I mean, he's so upset. He said, this has been emasculating. He's been emasculated, little Geordie. Yeah. It's just kind of funny. All right. So anyway, he's been emasculated, if he was ever that masculine to begin with. And the word on the street is he's definitely gone. Like, he's definitely gone. I'm not sure how you have this guy anchoring your flagship political program at a time like this. Not when you're dealing with such bias and the media obviously embracing that bias, and now the Trump administration calling it all out. For example, the FCC launching this major investigation into not just the lack of trust that Americans have in a major network like ABC, but also the DEI practices that they had been putting into place. This is the letter that went out on, I think it was March 27th, so just a couple of weeks ago, Brennan Carr addressing Bob Iger directly. Now, this is the second time he's done this, because shortly after Trump was elected, Brendan Carr put Disney on notice and said, hey, this was like after the $16 million lawsuit. Guess what? Americans don't trust you. So we may not be so willing to renew those licenses for all your ABC affiliates. See, ABC actually doesn't have that many affiliates that are, quote, owned and operated. Instead, all these TV stations that have your local news all around the country, they actually have these licensing agreements, and they pay ABC for content like The View, right? And George Stephanopoulos' program and David Muir's. And so Brendan Carr's like, okay, maybe this isn't flying because no one trusts you, and you have been so entirely wrong. And listen, I'm all for freedom of speech. You know that. But in the case of the airwaves being controlled by the FCC, maybe you actually need both sides. Maybe it can't be 99% pro-Biden, pro-Kamala all the time, 99% against Trump. It's probably like 99.999% against Trump. But in addition to that, in this particular case, you've got Brendan Carr saying, hang on, your DEI is a problem. It's actually not constitutional. And he wrote, I want to ensure that Disney ends any discriminatory initiatives in substance, not just in name. For another, I want to determine whether Disney's actions, whether ongoing or recently ended, complied at all times with applicable FCC regulations. You see, because they didn't. I mean, they really didn't. Remember when we found out that Gina Carano lost her job at Disney? And why did Gina Carano lose her job? Because, she wasn't willing to put all those pronouns on her Twitter feed that Rachel Zegler wanted her to put on. Rachel Zegler, ladies and gentlemen, being none other than the little Snow White that basically lost the franchise of Snow White for Disney and is costing them over $100 million. There are multiple reasons, though, not to pin it completely entirely on Rachel, only because you've got a very, very bad screenwriter in Greta Gerwig. She didn't get the top credit, which probably for her is a good thing, on that film, but she was brought in along with like 6 other writers to work on that Snow White script, which was a disaster. You have bad acting, you have bad directing, you name it, everything bad. Bad music even, bad music. So guess what? It's losing money because it's also just kind of an annoying story. We've got all these great stories, the Grimm fairy tales that the Disney company did, and now they're trying to wokeify them and remake them over and over and over again, and the American public is not buying it. So there were 2 DEI programs that were since dismantled at Disney, and Brendan Carr is like, I need to know whether you guys were actually abusing, frankly, federal law and the Constitution when you put all these things into place to begin with. Gina Carano separately has a lawsuit against Disney, and she's funded in part by Elon Musk. Meanwhile, as we said, this business is changing, right? There are structural changes coming along, and there's a guy named MrBeast who, if you don't know, like, he is the biggest deal on YouTube. The biggest deal on YouTube, okay? And so, you know, I'm happy. We're growing the channel here. And whatever you can, like, spread the word, spread the word. This guy is really, really king. And he is looking, allegedly, reportedly, to take on Disney. So they're going to get a little bit of competition with none other than Jimmy Donaldson, who has built a heck of a company. And he dreams, apparently, of being the next Disney. Now, he doesn't want to buy Disney. He wants to be Disney. And in this new world where streaming's the only thing that matters, guess what? He might just be able to do it. And I say that because what Disney has tried to do is so out of sync with what their customer base wants. What Disney has tried to do is not communicate via these new channels like streaming. I mean, they do a little bit, but heck, they lost... how many? 700,000 subs to Disney Plus in the last quarter of 2024. So it's not a business that's working for them. Along comes MrBeast. He clearly understands what people want. And, you know, he's young, but he's been doing it long enough that he has a feel for the customer base. And he has that youth demographic. And he has an opportunity there to really create a massive media company. Taking a look at this is an article that was in Business Insider, actually today. So this is brand new, hot off the presses. The CEO of the company, Beast Industries, has explicitly made the comparison when pitching prospective investors interested in its latest funding round. Two people familiar with the discussion told Business Insider. So Jeffrey Household, who joined the company in May, is presiding there over Beast Industries, and it looks to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in funding at a $5 billion valuation. So that's, you know, it's massive. I mean, it's not Disney massive, but who's to say it couldn't in time? You know, fast forward 10 years from now, does Disney still exist in the same way? When you look at the stock price, I don't know as it does. I mean, not unless they shed a lot of these assets and they turn things around and they get rid of the DEI stuff and this, that, and the other, and they figure out a way to deal with the streaming business, which is hemorrhaging subscribers. So Disney's facing a lot of challenges, to say the least. But hey, all of mainstream media is.